The morning breeze whispered through the tall pines, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and lake water. Grandpa Joe's cabin stood quietly in the middle of Whispering Pines Lake community, a retreat he'd bought almost 3 decades ago after hanging up his badge. For years, this had been his sanctuary. No sirens, no paperwork, no suspects. Just the creak of his old rocking chair, the bitter comfort of black coffee, and the chatter of squirrels squabbling outside the window. But peace wasn't on the schedule today. A knock rattled the cabin door. Sharp, impatient, and full of authority. "Joe, this is Karen Winslow, president of the Whispering Pines HOA. We need to talk. Now." Grandpa Joe let the silence linger as he took another sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading through him like armor. Only then did he rise, moving with the deliberate calm of a man who'd spent years never rushing for anyone. He cracked open the door just halfway. There she was, Karen Winslow, mid to late 50s, wrapped in the unofficial HOA uniform. A pastel blouse, beige slacks, and that clipboard she clutched like it held nuclear launch codes. Her lips were pinched so tight they looked vacuum-sealed. "Morning, Karen," Joe muttered, his voice gravelly. "To what do I owe this unpleasant surprise?" Karen didn't bother with pleasantries. She stepped forward, heels grinding into the porch like she was marking her territory. "We received a tip you may be violating several HOA codes. Unauthorized modifications, unpermitted structures, possibly even illegal activity. I'm going to need to inspect your property." Joe arched an eyebrow. "Says who?" "Says the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Section 14B of the bylaws allows inspections at the discretion of the board president." Joe's stare hardened. "Didn't realize the HOA was handing out search warrants now." Karen's nostrils flared. "We don't need a warrant. This is private community business." Joe let the silence weigh heavy. He shifted just enough so her eyes darted past him, desperate to peek inside. "You know I'm not one of your little weekenders planting daisies and acting like they run the place, right? You signed the covenant when you bought this cabin." "You're not above the rules," Karen snapped, folding her arms. "And you're not above the law," Joe fired back. "You got a problem with my cabin? Take it to the board. Then take it to a judge." That should have been the end of it. But Karen Winslow had never been one to take no as an answer. "I'm going in," she declared, and actually tried to step past him. Wrong move. Joe caught her wrist midair, spun her around with the ease of muscle memory, and before she knew it, she was cuffed to his porch railing like a rookie perp. "You just trespassed, assaulted a resident, and attempted an illegal search," Joe said evenly, barely winded. "You picked the wrong cabin today, sweetheart," Karen shrieked, thrashing against the cuffs. "You can't do this. I am the HOA." "And I was LAPD for 32 years, Joe cut her off. "You just tried to run a dictatorship on the wrong man." Somewhere in the distance, faint sirens began to echo. Joe leaned back into his rocking chair, sipping his coffee. His security system had already alerted the sheriff. By the time the cruiser crunched up the gravel driveway, Karen had exhausted herself, ranting about bylaws, civil liberties, and how her nephew was a lawyer. Sheriff Tom Brantley stepped out, hand resting casually on his holster as his eyes scanned the bizarre sight. Karen Winslow, HOA president, cuffed to Joe's porch rail like a teenager caught sneaking out. "Morning, Tom," Joe greeted with a nod. "Coffee's still hot if you want some." "Joe?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "What's going on here?" "She barged in uninvited," Joe explained. "Claims she had authority to search my property without a warrant." Karen whipped around, desperate. "He assaulted me. He's hiding something in that cabin, I know it." Tom raised a skeptical brow. "Karen, did you try to enter without permission?" Karen hesitated, her lips twitching. "I was performing my duties as HOA president." "That's not an answer," Tom replied flatly. Joe crossed his arms. She trespassed. I detained her. Minimal force. You know my record, Tom. I didn't hurt her. The sheriff exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Karen, you know you can't force entry onto private property. Not without police or a judge backing you. Karen's face burned crimson. He's violating the covenant. There are rumors. Something's hidden beneath that cabin. Weapons, stolen property, maybe worse. Tom's eyes shifted to Joe. Joe didn't answer right away. His rocking chair creaked as he leaned forward, eyes fixed on the sheriff. I've got nothing illegal in there, just memories. But Tom knew the man well. They'd served together on a drug bust 15 years ago. Joe wasn't reckless. He didn't keep secrets. And yet, rumors had been circling Whispering Pines. Strange lights in the woods late at night. Trucks coming and going before dawn. And Joe had been different since his wife passed last winter. Quieter, more closed off. Karen pounced on the silence like a wolf. Search it, Tom. Just look under. The floorboards. Or the shed. You'll see I'm right. Joe stood slowly, his frame casting a long shadow across the porch. Sheriff, you want to see what's under the floorboards? Tom's jaw tightened. Inside, Karen smirked as if she had finally cornered him. Joe opened the cabin door wide. Come on then, take a look. The sheriff hesitated, then followed him inside. The door creaked shut, leaving Karen cuffed on the porch, craning her neck, desperate to know what secrets lay beneath the floorboards. And that's when the lake, community's quiet morning, turned into the start of something much darker. Outside the cabin, Karen sat in her car, hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. But this wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. Something deeper, something political, something buried, was waking up beneath those pine trees. Inside, the cabin felt like a different world. Dust motes floated in the golden shafts of morning sun, drifting like tiny ghosts. Sheriff Brantley paused in the doorway, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The air smelled of old pine wood, worn leather, and underneath it all, a faint trace of gun oil. Joe moved toward the back wall without a word. His boots creaked across the floorboards like a metronome of secrets. Then, with the steady patience of a man who had nothing to prove, he knelt down and pulled back an old woven rug. Tom's brow furrowed. You've got a trap door? Joe simply nodded, fingers hooking under the edge of the heavy oak panel. With a grunt, he lifted it, revealing a dark stairwell that sank into the earth. I thought this was just storage, Tom muttered. It is, Joe said flatly. Storage for the parts of my life that don't belong above ground. The sheriff hesitated, but then followed as Joe started down the creaking steps. A faint electric hum grew louder with each descent, until at the bottom, a dim bulb flickered to life. And Tom's jaw tightened. The basement stretched out like an underground archive, rows of shelves, each meticulously organized. But instead of drugs or contraband, the shelves were stacked with boxes of sealed documents, surveillance photos, audio tapes, and dusty case files stamped confidential. Against the far wall, a collection of firearms sat neatly locked in racks, each one registered and legal. What the hell is this? Tom whispered. Joe pulled down a thick folder stamped Operation Cross Branch, 1998. Insurance. Tom's eyes darted across the folder, his breath catching. That case was sealed. Because it had to be, Joe said. Dirty cops, federal moles, weapons smuggling routes, right through Whispering Pines, back before this place had hiking trails and weekend cabins. Tom flipped through the photos, the grainy images showing corrupt officials in secret meetings, logs of missing evidence, even his own predecessor shaking hands with a man erased from every federal record. You kept all this? Tom muttered. Someone had to, Joe replied. I couldn't trust internal affairs. Couldn't even trust my own partner. The sheriff leaned on a wooden beam, absorbing the weight of it all. Why show me now? Joe's eyes hardened. Because Karen isn't just a nosy neighbor. She's Darren Winslow's niece, one of the city developers who buried this case. She's sniffing around because someone told her I still have the evidence. Tom froze. You think she was sent here? I know she was, Joe said. She didn't care about weeds or paint colors. She came for the truth. The sheriff exhaled slowly, closing the file. His voice was low, steady. You planning to do something with this? Joe gave a grim smile. Already am. That night, Karen was back, headlights off, creeping up the gravel like a thief. But she wasn't alone. From his porch shadows, Joe watched through thermal binoculars. 3 figures stepped out of the SUV behind her. 2 men in black jackets moved with a precision Joe recognized instantly. Military posture, sharp eyes, deliberate strides. These weren't HOA enforcers. They were professionals. Down the trail, Sheriff Brantley's tactical team waited in silence, radios dark, body cams live. Joe had already briefed him. Tonight, the game would end. Karen's voice carried just enough on the wind for Joe's directional mic to pick it up. He said the files are under the floorboards in a locked room. He's old, probably asleep. We're in, we're out. 10 minutes. The taller man grunted. No witnesses. Joe cracked his knuckles and allowed himself the faintest smile. The intruders crept toward the cabin. The first man stepped onto the porch, and a hidden tripwire snapped. From the trees, a drone whirred awake, beaming their every move to the sheriff's team. The doorknob twisted, and inside, motion sensors clicked alive. Suddenly, the cabin lights flared, bathing the porch in harsh yellow. Joe stood in the doorway, a shotgun resting across his arms, calm as ever. Evening, folks, he drawled. Sure this is the right Airbnb? Karen froze. The men didn't. One lunged forward, until the crack of a warning shot shattered the silence, spraying buckshot into the railing inches from his leg. Joe's eyes were cold steel. Next one's not a warning! And then, red and blue lights blazed through the trees. Sheriff Brantley's team swept in like ghosts, rifles raised, voices barking commands. The 2 men dropped instantly, face first into the dirt. Karen bolted. She made it 5 steps before Joe's hand clamped down, spinning her to the ground. This time, it wasn't his cuffs that clicked shut. You're under arrest, Sheriff Brantley said firmly, snapping restraints around her wrists. Attempted burglary, conspiracy to obstruct justice, unlawful surveillance, and thanks to our friend here, he nodded at Joe. We've got it all on camera. Karen spat at the ground, trembling with rage. You think this stops anything? Your uncle's already in federal custody, Joe cut her off coldly. This was bigger than you, Karen. Always was. Brantley's voice carried the final blow. Turns out Joe's been working with the FBI since 1999. Tonight you gave us the last piece we needed. Congratulations, you just helped us shut it all down. For once, Karen was speechless. As the SUV carrying her disappeared into the night, the forest slowly returned to its natural stillness. Joe and Tom stood shoulder to shoulder on the porch, watching the sirens fade. You ever think about retirement? Joe asked quietly. Brantley chuckled. Not until I've got a cabin like yours. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The lake shimmered in the distance, the pines swayed in the night breeze, and peace returned to Whispering Pines, at least for now. And just like that, Karen's empire of rules and intimidation crumbled. She thought she could bully her way into power, but she had no idea she was poking a man who had been playing the long game for decades. So what do you think? Was Grandpa Joe right to stop Karen at the door, or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next jaw-dropping twist. Because in Whispering Pines, the drama is never truly over.